Over 900 years, he shall regain his heartbeat. Over 90 years, he shall regain his intellect. Over 9 years, he shall recover his power. And over 9 days, he shall regain the world. The 1,000-year Blood War arc, or should I say, Soul Society being absolutely terrified of another villain.
Oh my god!
And of course, calling their version of 911.
Yes.
Ichigo.
Are you serious right now, bro?
If there's one thing that Bleach has always done right, it's undoubtedly the antagonist. Be it Aizen or Grimjaw, all enemies have left a deep impression on us. But they are nothing compared to the son of the Soul King himself, Yhwach, who has awakened after 999 years to take over Soul Society. Our awesome balls deep community asked us to cover Yhwach, and you know ABD has got your back. So in this video we will be breaking down everything that we know about Yhwach, from his origins to his motivations and plan, along with where the frick did this man even come from. But let's begin with who this geezer actually is. Bleach's first saga was about Soul Reapers, right? The second was about Hollows. So it was about time we see some Quincy action. Hey, calm down. I know you guys like Ichigo, but come on. The 1,000-year Blood War battle begins when Yhwach awakens from his 900 years of sleep. He identifies himself as the first Quincy, as well as the father of all Quincy's in the world. This means that Yhwach blood flows through every Quincy, including mixed-blooded ones like Ichigo. Yes, if you guys don't know Ichigo's a Quincy, then watch our playlist and know that Ichigo is indeed a Quincy. But his relationship with Ichigo runs deeper than that. As if it wasn't a big flex, Yhwach is also the son of the Soul King, the ruler of Soul Society, and the one who maintains the balance in the world. In fact, the Soul King is what mostly closely resembles a kami per se, being the deity in the Bleach universe, making Yhwach the son of God. Moreover, it seems that Kubo had sneaked in a foreshadow of Yhwach's appearance way earlier in the series, years before he would actually appear. Yep, back in the Lost Agents arc, Yhwach's presence was hinted at. We see Ichigo with all the major battles with his adversaries, where he passes right through them. From his initial battle with Ishida, Renji, Kenpachi, you know, it goes on all the way to Aizen. And then we see this mysterious figure, who is none other than Yhwach. But like all of Ichigo's ops, they have a beginning. And that's where we'll start. We don't know how Yhwach was conceived, but you know, I'm betting it was some spiritual Wuju manifestation. Or the other likelihood is the Soul King had himself a queen. Yeah, regardless, what's insane is that Yhwach had some OP powers right from birth. That's right. Even though looking into Yhwach's history, we learned that he was a baby without the ability to see, hear, speak, or even move. He couldn't even cry. Now, whilst he lacked everything else, he knew he would survive and live on. Against such odds, Yhwach had an incredible power, which was the ability to share fragments of his soul with others. Everyone who touched him eventually got something they didn't have before. Apart from gaining powers, the pieces of Yhwach's soul in them healed wounds that their own souls couldn't. However, there's always the catch when you gain some mysterious powers from a baby. Well, of course there was. Since fragments of Yhwach's soul lived through its holder's journey, each person's different aspects were imprinted on these pieces, which meant any powers they obtained along with their unique skill sets was pretty much kind of like downloaded on these soul fragments. And as we all know, nothing is really permanent, because these fragments went back to Yhwach when their owners died with all the imprints. Regaining his soul fragments meant that Yhwach gained every single abilities that was cultivated by those individuals, along with also gaining the natural ability of senses and functioning that Yhwach had originally lacked as a child. In fact, these individuals who touched him never really lived too long, but that didn't deter people from flocking around him and outright worshipping him. So when Yhwach finally gained the ability to hear, he realized that he was being called by the unusual name Yhwach. He understood that this resembled resembled the name of the people's god and took it on. It's no surprise that Kubo used solid real-life references to refine Yhwach's character, like his name is literally the direct inspiration from the Hebrew god's name, as the symbols can be translated as Yahweh or Jehovah. Yhwach's name also has a deeper connection to his powers, as the YH is taken from the name of God, and the German word Yhwach means awake. Thus his name can be viewed more poetically, the god who is awake. That's not even where the references end, because Yhwach is also like a parallel to the Christian concept of God, because number 1, he is the father of all Quincy's. Number 2, he is the son of the Soul King, being the Kami of the Bleach universe. Number 3, he is the Holy Spirit within each of his children who have a piece of his soul, giving them power. There's no doubt that Kubo portrayed Yhwach as a messiah for the Quincy's, as he proclaimed to desire peace and abhor violence. He hates conflicts and believes painful battles should end as quickly as possible, but sadly they are a necessary evil for his goals. However, he openly loathes Arancas and shows no mercy in killing or harming them despite having their loyalty. Arancas to him are seen as evil, much like devils, but this also tells us that he wanted all of his subordinates to oblige him in fear. We know this as even though Yhwach strongly condemns infighting and blind loyalty from his Sternritter followers, he chooses brutal means to end conflicts, like cutting off Luda's arms as a punishment for arguing with another Sternritter. In fact, he also has quite a cruel ability to call back the fragments of his souls in the Quincy children forcibly, which mind you is fatal to the person. Yhwach has to keep doing this because without absorbing souls, he will revert back to his early stages with no senses. Even though this process is necessary for Yhwach to heal and become stronger in his sleep every day, it's clear that he's all about the ends justifying the means. Whilst it seemingly saddens him to do so, Yhwach also undertook Al-Swalin, which is basically a large-scale forced callback of his soul pieces from Quincy's he deemed impure, including those with mixed blood. Remember, when he does this, the Quincy's die. Through this, Yhwach can also steal their powers and make them his own. However, not all pure-blooded are safe either, as Yhwach did this 9 years ago to regain his strength after reawakening, and many Quincy's, including Masaki, Ichigo's mother, died in the process, but the ones who survived were worthy of his Sternritter army, including Uryu Ishida. After his reawakening, Yhwach wasted no time ruling the One Yhwach, the organization of Quincy's with only one goal: war against the Soul Reapers. However, even before Yhwach gathered his current army, he had amassed one 900 years ago as well. In the 200 years after his birth, Yhwach created his kingdom called the Yhwach and then took over the northern lands, villages and forests, including the places where he found Yugrim, who later became his advisor, and Baz B. By this time, Yhwach also figured out a more effective way to distribute his soul by assigning shrift or letters to the Sternritters. This again goes back to the Christian theology, as in John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. These letters are practically words bestowed by Yhwach, who also sees himself as a god. He himself has the first letter, A, representation of Almighty, and each letter he assigned corresponded to a name that fits the person's powers. Lilibara was the first Quincy Yhwach bestowed a shrift upon. Through the engraving of a letter directly onto another's soul, he could share out his soul more deeply and with greater power. Needless to say, this power of soul distribution is very unique, and Quincy's with these abilities are near non-existent. In fact, Yugrim is the only Quincy other than Yhwach with the ability to impart his power onto another Quincy. He is the first in 200 years since Yhwach's birth, and thus he has the shrift B for balance. This is because both Yhwach and Yugrim are two sides of a balanced scale. Since Yhwach has to sleep every night to heal and live longer, this is the time he returns to being the father of the Quincy. During this time, Yhwach and Yugrim swaps powers as well as roles, where Yugrim takes up the mask of the ruler in his stead, being connected to Yhwach. The end goal of this soul distribution power is to make Yhwach himself stronger. When he calls back the pieces of his soul, effectively killing the host or his children, Yhwach receives the unique abilities the Quincy's had from their own birth. Once he does this, Yhwach can either keep the power or even redistribute it to the remaining Quincy's. Now, if you guys are confused on how all of this works, just think of it like this. Yhwach can basically give all of his children power, but not ability. Now, after this, upon their death, or when Yhwach decides to call the fragment of his soul back, the Quincy's leave their abilities to integrate, grow, and strengthen Yhwach's own arsenal of powers. And with such an OP power, Yhwach's desire to acquire more only grew. Even after conquering all of the nearby countries, he wished to create a new army. And this time, instead of the human realm, he wanted to conquer the Soul Society itself. Thus, he began recruiting senators from his empire, including Yhwach, and went on to war with the Soul Society. In the process, Yhwach and his Quincy army started a full-blown wipeout of the Hollows, to the point of causing a disruption in the balance of the world. This is when Yamamoto created the first Gote 13, full of vicious criminals and ruthless fighters, which inspired awe even in Yhwach. This battle resulted in a huge bloodbath, and the Quincy's lost in the most terrible fashion. As for their leaders, neither Yamamoto nor Yhwach were able to kill each other, something that came back to bite Yamamoto and Soul Society later. However, in this clash, Yhwach lost his powers, and the Quincy folklore of the King's Hymn branded him as the Sealed King, with the prophecy that we mentioned at the start of the video. Thus also began the mass eradication of Quincy's by the Shinigamis. Consequently, Uryu's grandfather was also a victim of this annihilation, to the point that Uryu and us believed that he was the only remaining Quincy.
Stop the cap.
Yep, come on, did you really think that Uryu was the final Quincy? The prophecy of course came true, and Yhwach regained his consciousness along with all his powers. Hence, from then, he began forming his new rule, the Reich, which translates to the Invisible Empire. This is because after losing the war with Soul Society 1000 years ago, all the Quincy's in Yhwach's army who had escaped hid themselves in Seireti itself. Yep, the center of Soul Society, because it was the last place the Shinigami would think to look. Using Reishi, they created space in the shadows of Soul Society. About 17 months after Aizen's defeat, the Quincy's took over Hyukomondo as well. Yhwach easily defeated Heribel, who had assumed the position of ruler after Stark's and Baragon's death. Yhwach's army then went on to kill a high number of Hollows, to the point when Mayuri came to know about their actions, he had to direct his squad to destroy 28,000 souls from Rukungai, just to balance the souls and keep the world intact. It's ironic that for a preacher piece, Yhwach's methods lacked any resemblance of goodwill or mercy. In fact, Yhwach's sole goal was even more ambitious than the previous one. He had decided to kill his father, God himself, the balancer of the universe. And yes, even after 1000 years, Yhwach still remembered the bad blood between Shinigamis and Quincy's. His plans also included totally pillaging and destroying Soul Society as collateral damage.
Yhwach from the 1000-Year Blood War is the epitome of cold, calculative patience and planning, something that his nemesis Yamamoto lost along the way. He plotted everything to the T, even identifying the 5 crucial threats to his cause. 1. Ichigo Kurosaki for his latent ability with his unique mixed heritage, and of course him being the main protagonist. 2. Kenpachi Zaraki for his monstrous physical abilities and fighting strength. 3. Ichibei for his wisdom, strategies, knowledge and experience. 4. Aizen for, well, you don't need me to tell you. And 5, of course, Kisuke Urahara for his means to outsmart any opponent. Moreover, since the last clash, Yhwach had learned one lesson. The biggest and most fearsome power the Shinigamis have is their Bankai. Without a Bankai, there's only so much they can do, especially against formidable opponents who have trained for years upon years to finesse their powers. And so, the Wonder Reich developed a medallion capable of sealing a Shinigami's Bankai. But what is worse is that when activated, it can steal a currently released Bankai in the immediate vicinity and allow the Quincy's to use it as their own. Oh yeah, that is right. This was an insane development that nobody could have seen coming, and so the Quincy's attacked the Soul Society whilst Ichigo, their #1 threat, was trapped in the Garganta. And since their base was literally inside Sarietti the whole time, Gote 13 lost a huge advantage of knowing their movements. This fight killed a huge number of Shinigami forces and brought even captains like Byakuya and Hitsugaya to their knees. This situation only became even more grim when Captain Commander Yamamoto was killed by Yhwach himself as well. But rather than following through to complete his goal, Yhwach ordered his army to retreat the moment he detected Ichigo's presence.
Why are you running?
With just a short encounter, Yhwach managed to unsettle Ichigo as he reminded our boy of someone very familiar. Oh yeah, that was none other than Ichigo's Zanpakuto, Old Man Zangetsu. The chads that have been watching our videos know exactly what I'm talking about, because Yhwach is actually an ancestor of Ichigo in a really twisted way, because Misaki, Ichigo's mother, was a Quincy. Thus, there is a piece of Yhwach's soul in Ichigo as well, which manifested as Old Man Zangetsu, unknown to Ichigo himself. So, don't be a silly willy like Ichigo and hit that notification bell so that you never miss an important upload. But with this strategic retreat, we also learn that Yhwach managed to recruit another member to his forces. And trust me when I say I felt betrayed, because this new member was none other than our boy Ishida. And this dude is an overachiever wherever he goes, because he didn't just become a foot soldier. No. Rather, he not only received the same Schrift A as Yhwach himself, but was also named Yhwach's successor. Like, my guy, what on earth did Ichigo ever do to you? Is this just payback for like that one time Orihime almost flashed you? Now, obviously I'm just kidding. This is a shonen anime, so of course, Uryu was just pretending to be on the Quincy side to save the day when needed by gaining Yhwach's trust. I promise you, it's some big brain shenanigans going on here. And thus, after regrouping, Yhwach begins the war for real this time, going all out against the weakened Soul Society. This time, Yhwach didn't slow down and was prepared to bear the heavy cost of his children's deaths, even after the Shinigamis figured out a way to get back their Bankai. Yhwach even took away the lives of his soldiers himself by undertaking another Osweilen as well. While his army ravaged the Soul Society, Yhwach himself made way to the Soul Palace where his father resided. More like what was left of his father, because his torso had been cut into 6 different parts. This makes us wonder just what did Yhwach have against the Soul King to go to such a horrible extent to kill him, other than maybe just daddy issues? Well, Yhwach's real goal was to erase the boundary between life and death. He wanted to liberate his people from the shackles and fear of death. This is because he simply believes in the ability granted to him since birth that empowers his people. In the simplest way, Yhwach was born a god. With his supreme status, he truly thinks that he can transcend heaven and gods, and he wants to make this divine ambition a reality because he alone can. Thus, his confidence never came from a hollow place. Rather, his personality and outlook on life were reflective of his ambition, as he himself said, "There is no room for comprehension or countermeasures against my power. All that I see is powerless against me." For achieving this goal, he had to return the current world to its primordial form, where all 3 realms, Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, and the world of living existed as one. In this world, only chaos persisted, but Yhwach's father, the Soul King, became a pseudo-ruler of the world, sacrificing himself as the linchpin of the universe's balance. Yhwach couldn't stand the limbo in which the Soul King existed at the whim of the very Soul Reapers who had cut off his appendages and heart to seal him for millions of years. He even expressed his disdain at the fact that his father's right hand, Mimihagi, was on the Shinigami side, even though he himself wished to die. To him, his father's pointless existence was a continued humiliation instead of something worthy of worship as the Shinigami regarded it as. To be fair, the Soul King himself showcased his own desire to die, as he later tried to fight off the Shinigamis who were protected him from his impending death. In fact, Yhwach was so disgusted by the Soul King's suspended state that all Quincy's felt the same hatred hatred and even spurred Ichigo into attacking the Soul King because of his Quincy blood. But in reality, behind all of this pomp and show of erasing people's fear of death, Yhwach's goal arose out of his own crippling fears. Yhwach was a coward and feared that his fate would be the same as his father's. As we discussed before, it was absolutely necessary for Yhwach to kill people and absorb souls every night to live longer and be stronger, even with his power to instantly heal himself. Yhwach was far from the god he was portrayed as to be, because as Yhwach said, to his majesty, battle is life itself. If he does not continue to absorb souls, eventually he will return to the body he once had, unable to see, to hear, even to move. Rather than a god, he was a slave to his fears that if he stops absorbing souls, he would return to the hell he once knew of with no senses. No matter the cost, his plan to make life and death one was just a means to give himself true immortality so that he would not have to keep assimilating other souls to keep himself alive. His necessity to live blinded him to morality. Yhwach was stuck in the cycle of killing people to survive, and because he lacked the courage to face the future blindly like Ichigo, he also wanted to acquire the power of his father, Almighty, which he succeeded in after his invasion of the Soul Palette. The Almighty gave him the power of balls deep prediction to see the infinite future possibilities and choose the one he actually wanted to happen, basically giving him absolute control over the future. Moreover, since he could see all possibilities, he could attack his opponents directly from the future. This made his actions instant and absolute. He could even destroy something in all timelines, making it irreparable in the present, as he did with Ichigo's Zanpakuto. Yhwach acquiring the Almighty was symbolic of him ensuring that he was securing a future where he is still surviving. Because just imagine, if you knew what was going to happen in the next moment and could avoid any mishaps, you would be content too. But even after absorbing the Soul King and acquiring the all-seeing eyes, he ironically couldn't see the one detriment in his plans: Ichigo's courage, the most important element of humanity. Fear and courage are two sides of the same coin, and one cannot exist without the other. Because humans have the fear of death, they can live life with courageous choices. Even Aizen, a genius, understood that only courage, or at least the fear related to it, could allow growth. Yhwach was the personification and culmination of all the despair Ichigo has endured and overcome in his life, and he did not believe Ichigo could overcome this despair. Yhwach was confident that Ichigo could not change the future when he was blind to all the possibilities. But again, he lied. Ichigo proved him wrong. Even with his eyes closed, he believed and he dredged on until he changed the future, just by the force of his organic growth. And thus he wielded the Sword of Fate, altering the future that Yhwach couldn't see, or rather was blind to, as he denied the possibility of his death from his dream. He killed Yhwach in the most poetic way possible. This panel looks like Yhwach is at the center of an almighty eye, the very symbol of fate within the story, and Ichigo cut right through it whilst killing Yhwach, indicating he has defied fate itself. Now, whilst Yhwach's character is a dichotomy between hope and despair, his end was exactly what he had feared. In the novel Can't Fear Your Own World, we learn that after his defeat, Yhwach's body was cut into several pieces, removing his arms and legs by the Squad Zero members. Later, the main body was placed in the King's Seal, becoming the very thing Yhwach swore to destroy. The son of God, the king of Wonder Reich, the nemesis of Genryusai Yamamoto, the father of Quincy, and the biggest threat to ever walk the Bleach universe, had everything, and yet he turned into nothing. He became the linchpin holding together the very universe he loathed, lingering on the border of life and death that he despised the most. In the end, he never escaped his fear. That was it for Yhwach's end, full of despair, but you should also watch this video covering the insane story of his own father, the Soul King, who also had a tragic path in life.